Evening all. I've written about this particular matter before, but in books and on my website, but I've never actually spoken about it. So here goes. Back in 1978, I found myself living here in this house alone after a divorce from my first wife. At that time, I was the manager of a record store, and I got a feeling that that probably I should move on to other occupations. I couldn't see myself being a record store manager at 50 years old and on. So what I really wanted to do at the time was become a koi dealer. And I had a big problem in finding a name for my business. I didn't want it to include the word koi. I didn't want it to include my name, surname or Christian name. And it took some thinking out for me. In the end, I decided on infiltration for several reasons. In the hobby around that time, filtration was beginning to be talked about regularly, and so the matter of filtration was very in at the time, and I thought infiltration would suit the name of the business. There was also another reason, in that I wanted to infiltrate the existing koi business. So I came up with that name and it stuck. It may have sounded a little bit wacky at the time, but that's why I chose the name. Now, I was very excited about opening this business, and I thought it could be a success, but it was a huge gamble. So my koi teacher at the time was an English guy. He lived in Stockport, which was only about 30 miles away from me, and his name was Roland Seal. He was also the chairman of the British Koi Keepers Society. We, over the years, since I've been a member of the BKKS, he and I became great friends. So I phoned him one night and asked him if I could come over and mention my latest news as to becoming a koi dealer. Now, I did go down there, and he gave me some of the best business advice I could ever have, although it didn't go along with what I was expecting and hoping for. So I got to Roland's house, mentioned that I would be becoming a koi dealer, and told him the name Infiltration. Now, I didn't know this until many years later, but Infiltration was the first koi only outlet, was to be the first koi only outlet outside of Japan. That's anywhere else in the world. When I say koi only outlet, I mean I was determined only to sell koi. There were other outlets in the UK at the time that sold a few koi, but they also sold other pond water fish, tropical fish, and some even sold marine fish. I wanted to stick to koi. I mentioned this name to Roland, and he said, yeah. He said, that sounds okay. And then he fired a question at me. He said, do you know of anyone who would pay £50,000 for a koi? I said, what? What are you talking about? Remember, this was 1978. Oh, he said, well, that's a pity if you don't know. You could buy one in Japan for £20,000, bring it home, put it in your pond, in your garden, sell it for 50,000, and have an easy life for the rest of the year while you went back and bought another one. I said, you're crazy. I said, that's not possible. He said, absolutely impossible. He said, well, okay, if you went to Japan and bought 2 koi for £10,000 each, could you sell these 2 for £30,000 each? I said, don't be silly, Roland, that's impossible. I said, and also, I want to sell dry goods. I want to sell everything that goes along with the koi hobby. He said, well, have you thought where you're going to put these dry goods? I said, well, I can have a little shop in my house. He said, that's not a good idea. So in the end, it went on and on and on. And in the end, he said, could you buy 100 koi for £500 each and sell them for £1,000 each? I said, well, you're getting closer to the mark. And Roland said, well, that's a pity. He said, because if you bought all these koi, you couldn't place them in your existing pond. So you'd have to buy premises and employ staff, vehicles, and pay expenses such as telephones, vehicles, staff wages, and so on. So I left that night and came back home, not wishing to think what Roland had said, but nonetheless, he'd said it. And as I've said earlier, it was excellent business advice. Stuff that I'd never even thought about. But it was true. And it was the best business advice I had ever received. Because some years down the line, I had a huge koi outlet. And I employed 14 staff, each with a company vehicle. I had to pay business rates. I had to pay all the other expenses, gas, heating, water, to keep these koi alive. But it all came true eventually. So anyway, thanks for listening tonight. Thank you.